Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Afi and I'm back again with another video. This video is a reloving dating breakdown and I actually really enjoy doing these. And this is going to be chapter 5. I've done chapter 4. If you haven't, wait, what? Is it chapter 5 or chapter 4? So this is chapter 4, not chapter 5. And if you haven't watched my other reviews, I'm going to link them down below in the description box and you can check them out. If I'm looking distracted or not at the camera, it's because my notes are on my laptop and that's what I use to record. And so yeah, I'm just out here reading out what I got from the book and basically sharing my knowledge on it and why I liked it so much. So chapter 4, the topic is making the bold move, how to have great dates and fulfilling relationships. And if you haven't been here for the past videos, I've basically talked about what the idea of real love is and what the idea of imitation love is. I've talked about some getting and attacking behaviors. Those are things that you do when you're upset. And I've also discussed the idea of why you should have real love, the reason why it's important to have real love in your life. And then now I'm going to discuss about making the bold move, how to have great dates and fulfilling relationships. So now we're getting more into the meat of it, like why is it that, what are the consequences of not having real love in your life, and then you get into a relationship. That's basically what the rest of the book is going to be about, just in different topics. So this chapter is devoted, I'm deciding to read exactly what the author has said. So this chapter is devoted to helping you find real love and the lasting unconditionally loving relationships that inevitably follow. So men and women are much more alike than different. So in this book, the thing is that in this chapter especially, the author talks about how men and women are different, and sometimes we get stuck in how different men and women are. But he says men and women are much more alike than they are different. They share the common and essential need for real love. So maybe the way they show imitation love is different, or the way they accept imitation love. Like for example, we would say men would prefer to have power and pleasure, and women would like what are the other behaviors? I can't even remember. But my point is that regardless of which getting or protecting behaviors, whichever gender gravitates towards, men and women both have a need for real love. When we realize that men and women share a primal need for real love, we can easily understand their behavior and we can create enduring and easily traveled bridges between the sexes. Where men and women differ most is in the forms of imitation love and getting and protecting behaviors they use when they don't feel loved unconditionally. Boys tend to use power and pleasure safety. So yeah, and then women look for safety basically. And I think I just anyway, whatever. So that's what's usually different. It's how they show the forms of imitation love is what differs most, and the getting and the protecting behaviors. And something that's important to mention is the author says sometimes there's exceptions. So some women would want power and pleasure, and some men would want safety. But when he talks about if we're generalizing things, which is not supposed to be done, but just for study's sake, that's what is found. So boys have a more aggressive inborn quality, which is also reinforced by social norms and expectations. It should be no surprise then to learn that boys tend to use that's basically just an intro into this chapter. We're basically getting into the meat of that, now how can you find real love? Now that we know that men and women show imitation love differently, how then can we find real love and follow it with getting good relationships? So finding real love as a subtopic. So in chapter 3, we talk about there's a statement that only as I share with you who I really am, flaws and all, can I feel that you see who I am, accept me, and care about my happiness. And in chapter 3, we talk about how like you feel like you're not loved because you're not allowing yourself to be seen. And if you're not seen, then of course you can't be accepted. And if you're not accepted, then you cannot be loved. And so when we use getting and protecting behaviors, then what we're doing is we're shielding ourselves from being seen, which in turn leads us to not feeling loved. So the role of faith in telling the truth and finding real love. So here he talks about faith is the act of moving into territory that is unknown to us. It means taking action when we can't predict the results. As long as you hide who you are, you cannot feel seen, unconditionally accepted, or loved. For example, the farmer in the seeds. So the farmer in the seeds is a story that he gives that's about this farmer who has like 50 seeds. How will he know if these seeds are going to germinate and grow? Only if he plants them. If he doesn't plant them, then he's not going to be able to he's not going to know which ones are going to germinate and which ones are not. So if we bring this into our lives, similarly, it doesn't matter how many people don't love you. What matters is that you find those who do, and that becomes possible only as you plant the seeds of who you really are in the hearts of those you meet. You will be richly rewarded by the crop you harvest. So, and this is gonna come later, but the idea of this chapter completely is becoming like is putting yourself out there enough for you to find the real love that you need. So instead of you hiding behind lies and hiding behind the protecting and getting behaviors, you put yourself out there, you tell the truth of who you are. Somebody can either accept you or reject you. Regardless of the matter, you need to put yourself out there in order to find the people who will love you. And I'm saying this, and it sounds so simple in writing. Practically, it's much more difficult. We all know that, but it's worth trying. And the role of faith is that you have to have faith that when you put yourself out there, then somebody will like you. And if they don't like you, then they're not the person for you. So the next subtopic is tell the truth to whom. So there's a few points here. Actively look for people who demonstrate some capacity for unconditional acceptance. So those are the people who you tell the truth to. People who show you that they accept people unconditionally. You don't want to be telling the truth about yourself to somebody who is full of judgment. You've seen them judging other people, and now you want to go and tell them the truth about yourself. They're going to shut you down, they're going to judge you. So you have to be very careful with who you're telling the truth, because the point of this exercise is not for you to be scared of telling your truth. It's for you to be comfortable enough with telling your truth to people, enough for you to tell to everybody. Okay, so then here there's an example about calf roping. Example, passive versus active. So in this one, he says, if I ask you to tell me about how calf roping should happen, and you're in a room full of people, right? And then you see one person who's asleep, two people who are just chilling, another two people who have cowboy hats and shoes. And so what's your reaction? Yeah, if you do. So he was like, what are you gonna do? You could either lie and sleep, you could just sleep on the floor and hope that somebody comes and calls you and tells you about this calf roping. Two, you could eavesdrop on different conversations happening in that room and hope that someone is talking about calf roping so that you can know. And three, you could walk up to the guys with cowboy whatevers and you could ask them, because they seem to be the ones who know. And the idea of being passive versus active, he says you could do either, and either of them could work, but which one works better if you're more active, right? So he says it's not realistic to look for people who are perfectly loving all the time, but you can find those who possess a reasonable assortment of the qualities. So if we take the calf roping example and come back to real love, if you are just chilling there and sitting down, there's this post that says, are you sitting at home waiting for your husband to come? He's not going to come and knock at your door. So you have to actively put yourself out there. You have to go places, you have to do things, you have to make yourself in stuff. If you're looking for something, you have to go out and look for it. You can't look for it and then sit down. Like, that doesn't work. You have to do all you can to get it. So that's basically the idea here. Like, you can't look and so at the end he says there's no person who is perfectly loving, but you can find those who possess a reasonable assortment of the qualities. So you find somebody who is loving, who will accept you for who you are, who has shown that they are a good person, who has shown you that they can be vulnerable and stuff like that. So they would understand if you were. You have to find such people. So the second people to tell the truth to is be aware of your expectations. It's not even people, it's a tip. So okay, so this leads to why you have expectations for certain people. And there's a couple of reasons of why we have expectations for certain people. And so I'm going to read them out. So, one, you've given your time and attention to that person, so you've determined often unconsciously that he or she owes you. According to social norms, that person occupies a position in your life that obligates or requires him or her to care about you. He or she might be, for example, your spouse, parent, teacher, sibling, or other family member. He or she has promised to love you, as in the case of a parent or spouse. When people make promises to us, we tend to hold them to their commitments. You've determined that since someone knows you well, he or she should know what you need. We continue, we must be very aware of our expectations of other people because those expectations have a strong effect on our ability to feel loved. The greater your expectations of a person, the more you'll be hurt if that particular person doesn't respond to you in the way you want. For that reason, in the beginning of the process of learning to tell the truth about yourself, you need to be somewhat cautious about sharing potentially tender aspects about who you are with people whom you might have high expectations, like a spouse, boss, parent, or child. When those people don't accept you, the disappointment is just too harmful. So the point here is we have expectations for people. We expect that if something, like if you tell somebody your truth, someone who's like your family, if you tell your family your truth, then they will accept you. But oftentimes some people don't do what you expect them to do, and so you have to be very careful with your expectations. And so the point of this one is basically like, don't, like, for example, do not tell your family that you killed somebody. You get, or maybe tell your family that you killed somebody. I mean, it depends on your family, but that's the point. If you want to tell a truth, you need to look for somebody who is caring enough, and so who cares for you but is not involved in your life, because sometimes you're putting people in trouble. So look for a good friend. That's the kind of person who you tell things about yourself. I'm not saying don't tell your family. I think it's important. If your family has shown that you are in good enough a situation where you can share it with each other, then that's great. But if you can see, because usually you know the kind of person you can tell things and you know the kind of person you cannot tell things, be very careful. Pray for discernment. The third thing is avoid the potential of unnecessary injury. So here he gives an example of learning to ride a bike. So he says, if you're trying to ride a bike, will you go on a flat piece of land or will you go on rocky whatevers? You probably would go on the rocky ones, because if you go on the rocky thing, then you have a higher chance of falling. While if you go on and getting hurt terribly, while if you go on the soft one, you will fall, but it's not going to be as damaging as this other one. So why put yourself in that kind of situation? So similarly, although some rejection and discomfort are virtually unavoidable in the process of telling the truth about yourself, you can avoid unnecessarily damaging situations. Eventually, as you feel more unconditionally loved, you'll find that you can be honest in more and more situations. That feeling of security, however, builds only over significant periods of time. Another example of riding a bike, because I don't know about the floor thing, I think a better example is you would not be learning how to ride a bike on the road, on like a highway. You would use like a gated place where you are safe. And so that's the point of this as well. When you are trying to tell the truth, some people are going to reject you. That I'm not saying that if you tell the truth, people are going to accept you 100%. No, if you're very good at discerning, if you're very meticulous, then everything will be fine. The higher chance is somebody is going to reject you. But just be careful. Be careful. Do not put yourself in situations where you're going to be harmful. You're going to be harming yourself. It's really it's not necessary. So he says that feeling of security, however, builds only over significant periods of time. So as you get used to telling people that are accepting the truth, then you can move on to telling other people. So the next thing is don't tell the truth to people who would be injured by it. So just make sure that, for example, if you're having an issue, you don't come and tell someone you did this to me and blah 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 blah, especially if you know that they will be offended by it. Sometimes there's a very thin line between speaking your truth and offending other people, and that's something that you need to be careful about. Telling your truth is one thing, but offending other people is a whole other thing. And people like to say you don't owe anyone anything for as long as you're telling the truth. I think it's true, but I also think you have to be very careful, because sometimes it's not necessary, and so you have to be very, very careful about that. And the last thing is choose faith over fear. Have faith that you will find people capable of accepting and loving you. You can expect that if you tell the truth over and over to a variety of people, you will eventually find the real love you need. Hi guys, so this is me editing and realizing that this video is so long, so I'm going to split it into two parts, 15 minutes and maybe 18 minutes, and I hope you enjoy it. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2, and if you haven't watched part 2, watch part 1, and yeah, so I hope you enjoy. Okay, bye.